So Pastor Larry asked me to speak again on, a couple weeks ago. So I've been kind of thinking about it, writing things down. And I just kind of get you kind of where my thought was going, what kind of guided me. And but before I get that started, there's a few weeks back, or maybe a couple months now, we were doing a fellowship night on Thursday, and I centered it around witnessing, making sure to do what God has called you to do. And there was a verse when I was researching that just stuck with me, and it was Isaiah chapter 55, verse 10 and 11, and it says, "The rain and snow come down from the heavens and stay on the ground to water the earth. They cause the grain to grow, producing seed for the farmer and bread for the hungry. It is in this same way with my word. I send it out, and it always produces fruit, and it will accomplish all I want it to do." And so I just pray that, today God has laid some thoughts on me, and hopefully He gave me the right words and the way He wants them put out there as best I can stumble through them. And maybe there's something, I hope that He guides you in a way that you can hear what message He has for you in those words. So that's kind of the mindset that started me on this. And, I've been really thinking about just the way that we are when we interact with each other when it comes to love. And, Pastor Larry talks a lot about loving people and embracing them with love, but also confronting things that we stand against. And that's been weighing on me. And so I start with, the people we love the most in our lives. At least for me, a lot of times they don't even know how much we love them. And it can go even further than that, to where they, it's not even about knowing the breadth and the depth of it, and think about me on the way home for this, because I'm going to share some stuff that my wife's going to definitely talk with me about on the ride home. And I don't say this to embarrass her or anything like that, but it just kind of gets you where I'm coming from. And, if she really felt free and comfortable to talk to you, she's on multiple occasions, and I'll tell you more often than I'd care to admit, she'll tell me she doesn't even know if I like her sometimes. And like, that chokes me up right now, because I love her so much, and for her to feel that, it just hurts. And so, like that, I'm like, man, I'm digging in myself, and I'm trying to understand why. And, so anyway, like I said, I don't say that to embarrass her, but it's like, man, if somebody that I can love so much has no idea if I even like her on days, like, what am I doing wrong? And that fell me into Mark chapter 12, verses 29 through 31. And Jesus replied, "The most important commandment is this: Listen, O Israel, the Lord our God is the one and only Lord, and you must love the Lord our God with all of your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. The second is equally as important: love thy neighbor as thyself, and no other commandment is greater than these." And so I got reflecting on that, and, if I really believed that those two were the most important things I need to be doing in my life, then what drives me to hide this love that I have for my wife, for my daughter, for those of you in this room, my love for God? Like, why am I hiding that? And, I sat on that for a while, and it comes back to, I think we all have an experience you can go back to where you really were vulnerable with somebody. You opened up, you cared for them, and they judged you, they rejected you, they did something that just made you. And I know for me, I don't remember the exact instant, but I can remember saying, this is never going to happen again. I'm gonna wall up. I'm gonna protect myself. I'm gonna put on all these defenses to protect my heart, and not show those feelings and that caring for anybody, because then they can't hurt me. And it's like, okay, so now I know that. I know why I'm doing that. And then how do I apply that to strengthen my relationships first with Christ, because I have found recently in the last few years, if I don't strengthen that one first, the rest of them, it's faulty. And so how do I do that? How do I put that there? And I jumped around a little bit. Sorry. And I do, and I feel that most vulnerability when I do share those feelings with somebody. And if I'm putting on the armor of the world, I lock that love inside in a dark place. And when you do that, it kills it. It darkens your heart. It blackens you out. And it makes it to where you can't receive love either. And it just chokes out all that good. And I'm like, man. And I know there's not a piece of the armor that is of love, but, rather than putting on the armor of God, I've put on armor of the world. And anything of the world, it's not going to have fruit. It's going to die on the vine. And so, and I was like, man, as soon as that revelation came to me, I was like, if that's not letting the evil one and his demons win, I really couldn't tell you what is. And contrary to belief, like a lot of people will say, Ann and I were just recently in a motorcycle wreck, and people are like, man, why would God let that happen? And I'm like, God's not in that. God wasn't in that hurt. God wasn't in that rejection that I had years and years ago. God is not in this armor that I've put on to protect my heart. And and then he wasn't in the fear that came from it. He wasn't in the shame that I felt because I didn't feel good enough to receive back what I had put out. And I really, the more and more I talk with Pastor Larry in our personal discussions and things that are going on around in the church, I really do feel that it's definitely a spiritual attack. And this tool that they used, it is so well crafted and so well forged that it strikes at the core of each of us, and it's specifically to divide and separate each of us from each other, and more importantly, to make us feel separated from the love of God. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, right? I was like, oh man, that's bad enough. I understood that, all of that worldly armor and all of that packing away, it makes us willfully choose to abandon those two commandments that are the most important, of loving God with everything of what we are and loving our neighbors as ourselves. And it starts with not even loving ourselves enough to let ourselves be vulnerable to share with those around us. And it's like, man, that got me, right? So, and then I felt like, I was like, he must be telling me this because I really do believe that we all have an experience and feelings of fear and shame. It's a universal truth. I don't think there's one person on this world that doesn't feel it. There's a few people with some mental diagnoses that if you don't feel it, you may not want to admit it. You end up in prison or running companies, one of the two. Or president, you can do that too, right? And so, but as men, we are taught that any kind of fear or shame that we share out, that we're weak, that we're less than, that, man, I already feel less than worthy having had the feeling. And now if I share this feeling, I'm even less of a man. I'm even less of the protector. And, maybe it's because I'm getting older. I'm 44-ish, and it's coming close. I mean, these are definitely in-town miles. They're not highway miles on this beard, But I overwhelmingly have begun to understand and realize that it's not the fear and shame, it's not the tears that run down your cheek that make you weak or strong. It's not the lack of them that makes you strong, and it's not that you let them out that makes you weak. It's what you do with those feelings. It's what you do if by putting on that worldly armor, I'm running and hiding from this thing I needed to confront, that I needed to face head on. And so, there's a huge strength in facing your fears, in facing your vulnerability, and letting the real you shine through, and trusting God to protect your heart after the math. Because whatever it is, I may not understand it, but if I trust him, I know he's going to get me through the other side. And so, that's the rough and tumble part of it. But that took me then to the next chapter that I was looking at when I was trying to figure out about love and what to do about it. And it's Romans 35 through 39. And it says, "Can anything ever separate us from Christ's love? Does it mean he no longer loves us if we have trouble or calamity, or we're persecuted, or hungry, or destitute, or in danger, or even threatened with death? As the scriptures say, for your sake we are killed every day and being slaughtered like sheep. No, despite all these things, overwhelmingly victory is ours through Christ who loved us. And I am convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love, neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the fears of today or the worries of tomorrow. Not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. No power in the sky above and the earth below. Indeed, nothing in all of creation can ever separate us from the love of God, which is revealed through Jesus Christ our Lord." And man, that was so powerful, right? Because in my own mind, I was like, well, that's not true. Like I can turn away from God, and I can not choose to accept salvation, and that would separate me from God's love. And the more you read, God's love's still there for you. He's still calling you, even if you're going against him, even if you're not listening, even in your sin. God is still begging you to just turn to him and let him love you. You can't even run away from it. It's still there, whether you accept it. That's another story. But you cannot be separated from it. And so I was like, man, that's just soaking that part in. You could probably just camp there and live for a lifetime, just like absorbing the unconditional love that God has for us. And I grew up at a Southern Baptist church in Louisiana, and then that continued up here and back and forth. And it may come as a shock, there's a lot of Old Testament fire and brimstone kind of God, with a lot of wrath and judgment on the people of earth. And so this was kind of a hard concept for me to really wrap my mind around, that there was love all the time with all these things that had happened through the Old Testament. But you go back with an open mind and you read through these stories, and even in God's punishments, even in the horrible punishments to come in Revelations, it's all about God's love and trying to really get people to just wake up and see how much he loves us. And another story from my childhood is, I can always remember my mom, my grandma, they would ask do you know how much I love you? And I always thought it was this much, all the much in the world, trying to get your arms around the world. And I didn't realize it was a parable for Jesus being on the cross. And also for all of the love that's in the world, because by stretching out his arms in that way over the cross for us, it was displaying how much God truly loves us. And so, there's a lot of ways to kind of relate that back to our own experience where, we think we know what unconditional love is. I think, we think we do. Parents think they have it for their children. Anna and I, we have 3 dogs, and I'll tell you what, we think we have it for them too, but I'll tell you, both my daughter and my dogs, man, they can do some stuff to irritate me. They really can, right? And man, they make me so mad. Or you name a negative emotion, and I bet you, I can tell you I've had it at least 2 or 3 times with each dog and my daughter and my wife. And again, please pray for me on the way home. But then those dogs, man, they'll just do the silliest thing. They'll get the zoomies, or they'll grab their favorite toy and kind of Brutus. He'll run towards something like full speed, and then he slows down and he just kind of prances on it, and it's just adorable. They'll deal with whatever repercussion for their bad behavior, and then they snuggle in and lay their head right on your chest or something, and it's all of that frustration and anger and rage. It just melts away. And so, like, it made me kind of put those two experiences together. And it's like, there's the story of if you just had a mustard seed of faith. And I say that and I take it to myself. If I just had a mustard seed of the courage, if I just had a mustard seed of faith of what Christ had, knowingly going to the cross and sacrificing his life for each and every one of us, if I could just tap into just the most minuscule portion of his courage and faith, then I can allow myself to calm down. I can allow that emotional storm to pass, those feelings of rage, those feelings of anger, and then I could sit there and I could let that storm calm down. I could let the waves subside. I could let all those emotions just fade away, and then I can be left with the love of Christ that's washed over me, and then it flows out. And I'll tell you, it happens more often than you think. And I don't often tell my wife what I'm doing, so then she gets more mad because I'm quiet. And it's not that I come back and we talk about it, but man, if I was to talk about it in that moment, I wouldn't be doing it with love. And I would be doing it with these other emotions. And then I'm like, okay, so if I know I love this woman, if I know that I love Christ, and in the moment I'm angry with him because my motorcycle went down, like, why didn't you protect me? Well, that's a terrible thing to ask. And it takes you down a bad road. But if I can just sit with it, and then I can ask myself inside, like, why am I upset? Am I even really mad at this thing? Am I even really angry with what my wife did? Or am I hurt? Or am I scared? Or am I afraid for something? And then I take that, and I'm like, okay, and I can process what I'm really feeling because the anger is past. And then I can say, okay, do I really need to even do anything about this? Because, again, it's all these childhood lessons. Every time I point one finger at her, there's 3 more coming right back at me. So for everything I think she's doing wrong, I guarantee you there's 20 that I'm doing wrong that she's not calling me on. And it's just a different perspective. And when I come from that way, then I can talk to her in love. And then about 2 years ago, I had a counselor tell us, like, when you're getting in a weird fight, you're getting in a weird argument, it's not just the two of you in the room. I was listening to another podcast to help me out, and I want to say it was Joe Rogan, but it wasn't. I can't remember the guest that he was talking about. Everybody listen to Joe Rogan, it's fine. But the guest was very spiritual, and they said, up until recent history, the nuclear age, it was very common for people to really understand that there was a physical and spiritual world, and that there were both good and evil forces acting upon that physical world. And modern times have really gotten away from believing that. But when I put it in that light, and I physically imagine these spiritual beings in that room with the argument, I know which ones are rooting for me to just sink my teeth in and just go after her full bore with what I know would destroy her. And then I can see the side that's like, that's not who you're supposed to be. You need to choose better. Be a better man. And so, okay, and truly I find more often the case is it is that spiritual force in tipping my internal scales to choose violence, to choose anger, to choose aggression over love. And so it lies on us to choose love, to be Christ-like, to let that love wash on us and then spill on to those around us. Now, we can disagree with other people, with their choices and with their actions. And some of you, I'm not sure, because I lose track of faces. Some of you know us, some of you don't. And I'd be willing to bet that you'd probably classify both Anna and I as very quiet, passive people. All right, so and that shows you know us, right? So now we're not pacifists, but loving someone doesn't, and it does not, and it should not prevent us from challenging them, making corrections. All right, and we just need to also challenge ourselves to do it in love, in a voice of love and empathy, to try to understand without condoning what somebody is doing and love them through what they're going through. Now, of course, there are non-negotiables that I was talking with Aaron about earlier when he tried to steal my breakfast, where you need a more hands-on approach to intervention. And that does happen. Many of you know my background. A few of you in here have also had a background where you had to physically intervene with people. But I would still challenge each and every one of us to say that even that physical altercation, the times that we've gone off to war, the times that we've had to hurt people, it's done in love as well. And that's a hard concept for people to reconcile around too, is, how could you kill in love? How could you correct in love? How could you hurt somebody in love? And sometimes you just have to. It's out of the spirit of love, of protecting somebody. I in myself will accept a lot of verbal and physical abuse, but I don't tolerate not even the hint of it to my wife. And it's just a non-negotiable, and I still feel guilty about it, but I know that I'm doing it out of love for her, and I know that I've probably tried everything else in between. Now, I will also say that providing that correction verbally, trying to walk people through, trying to, hey, this hurt my feeling, standing up for yourself. I definitely need to find a way to deliver that kind of tough love in a way that really shows the empathy that I have, shows the love that I have. But I'll also tell you that requires me to face my fears of being vulnerable, of being rejected, of being, those feelings not being reciprocated. But man, again, if that isn't Christ-like, I don't know what is. And I'd much rather choose Christ-like than continue wearing this armor of the world and becoming like the evil one. It's just no good. And I would have never come to this if somebody wouldn't have loved me enough to have that tough conversation with me. Hey, Joe, I know you're not an unempathetic, arrogant jerk, but that's how you're coming across. And if you don't change it, you're going to alienate all the people that love you. Man, if somebody didn't love me that much, where would I be? And so when you hold that back from other people, you're leaving them in a place that they don't even know that they're trapped. And so we owe that to them, to work on ourselves for that love and empathy and challenge and confront. Guide them to where you know that they want to be by who you know they are. So in that, that is some of the ways I'm currently working on myself through Scripture to draw closer to Christ. Because all of that starts with my wife telling me that she doesn't even know if I like her. And that doesn't align with me wanting to be Christ-like. And that guides me into these principles I was talking about today. And so I'll close with I just hope you please remember from this that the Lord our God is the one and only Lord. And you must love him, the Lord your God, with all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. And the second is equally important. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And no other commandment is greater than these.